it's far more severe than just talking about mere fatigue. Stress versus burnout. Stress is simply too much. People are under pressure, they're challenged, and you kind of know it, you feel it. The thing about burnout is it's caused by not having enough, not enough hope for positive change. And it doesn't happen overnight. People kind of graduate to experiencing this level of depression, anxiety, and other symptoms that we're going to be talking about. Anyone who is continually exposed to high levels of stress and pressure can succumb to it. But it's particularly pronounced for those who are in the helping professions, for caretakers. That includes higher education. When we talk about life-related contributions, you continue to function, however, you discontinue your ability to thrive. That's a key factor in terms of burnout. It's a failure to take time to socialize and have fun, inadequate sleep, chronic taking on too much, and engaging in poor health habits. Personality traits that are related to it. This might be you. Think about it and go through the checklist. Are you a perfectionist? Do you have a high achieving type A personality? Do you have an excessive need for control, a reluctance to delegate because you know better and you're going to do it better and it's not fast enough if someone else does it? In turn, this perfectionistic tendency can lead to a pessimistic view of yourself and, in fact, of the world. You may be on the road to burnout if you wake up every day and suspect that it's just not going to go well, and then it doesn't. Your activities make you feel as if they're just mind-numbing, dull ways to spend your time, or maybe you feel overwhelmed. And the thing is that nothing is going to make you feel better. Physical signs: chronic fatigue, sleep disturbances, difficulty concentrating, perhaps headaches, and it even affects our immunity. When we talk about the emotional signs of burnout, simply put, you start to feel out of control. Irritability, depression, anxiety, a loss of motivation. You begin to feel helpless, trapped, defeated. Also, in terms of depersonalization, we start to feel a detachment, pessimism. Maybe we start to feel isolated and loss of enjoyment in things that used to bring us pleasure. So this is not a personality trait. This is a place that stress has brought us. And that's an important distinction. It's not how you typically felt, but how you feel at this point in time. Accomplishments are diminished. There's a sense of hopelessness and, in fact, negative self-talk about your ability to complete tasks. Procrastination, not engaging. When we talk about hopelessness, we also talk about a diminished sense that you can get things done. Seligman was a psychologist back in the 70s out of the University of Pennsylvania who coined a phrase, learned helplessness. He did experiments with dogs in which what he would do is he would put them in a cage, administer a mild shock at the bottom of the cage, the dog would escape. After a number of trials, the dog learned that shock, escape. Then he put a lid on the top. The dog would try to escape, hold on to the side of the rail, and then eventually succumb to the shock and just sit there. He would take the lid off and try to introduce the escape to the dog. The dog would not buy it. Even in helping the dog by placing it on the other side of the cage, after a while, the dog would just sit there and accept its fate. That is an extreme force that burnout can have on not only animals, but humans. Behavioral signs: withdrawing from responsibilities, isolating yourself from others, skipping work, perhaps coming in late, leaving early. So you can see there are both ends of the continuum, either overdoing it or underdoing it and not being able to function. And people use food, alcohol, drugs to cope, to achieve a better feeling. And of course, without success. Undetected, unmanaged, when we talk about burnout, it can also increase our risk of physical ailments, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, gastrointestinal issues. It can even lower our good cholesterol, our HDL, musculoskeletal pain, back pain, shoulder pain, just body ache, depression, anxiety. When we look at the effect of burnout from a perspective of COVID, we look at panic-related, pandemic-related burnout. Billions of people have experienced this worldwide, this chronic stress at home, at work, and in their communities. And why not? It's uprooted our lives. It's taken us out of our comfort zone. We've been faced with uncertainty, and we've been faced with grief and, unfortunately, loss. We've learned to homeschool our children, work remotely, and isolate ourselves from human contact. I remember when this first hit, we were wearing gloves, washing our hands constantly. We were even washing our food. Going for a walk with my wife, I would see an oncoming person. Even if I knew them, I would yell out, oncoming, impending, move to the side. We have become completely dehumanized. We've taught our children, stay away from people. There's a dangerous virus out there. The result, the pandemic has exacerbated the depth of and exposure to burnout. So COVID fatigue, what is COVID fatigue? According to the World Health Organization, it is feeling demotivated and exhausted with the demands of life during the COVID crisis. This fatigue ultimately is felt can lead to even more devastating emotional secondary effects. The need to pivot and navigate through the world that exists now is fundamental. Not the world as we knew it, not the world as we wish it to be, but the world as it now exists. Let's think about it. Pandemic fatigue is completely natural. When we look at the stress reaction, which is fight or flight, there's an alarm state, something's happening. It cautions us. We need to take action. So we do. There's a resistance stage. That is followed by exhaustion. Initially, our short-term survival skills kick in, fight or flight, Maslow. The fear kept us motivated and active. With time, however, that fear was replaced with growing levels of frustration. Then exhaustion and complacency began to emerge. When we look at the world as it exists right now, it is a cauldron of pressure and stress associated with war, financial, political, social factors. So it's not just a pandemic. However, combining it with the elements of the pandemic has led to anxiety about our future, about the future for us, our families, and for the world. This deep concern and mixed emotion. When will this pandemic actually really end? Between 2020 and 21, we've had the Alpha, the Beta, the Gamma, the Delta, and most recently, the Omicron variants emerge. Perpetual feeling of loss of control. Globally, many of us have turned to become cynical and emotionally exhausted. I'm exhausted even just talking about it. Effects on education. Historically, higher education has followed a relatively consistent model. COVID has dramatically altered the framework of higher education. Staff and faculty positions have been eliminated, furloughed, or reduced. Others have accepted early retirement options. In fact, it has been very disruptive. We lost the base of knowledge, and we've lost many of our colleagues in the classroom, virtual, hybrid. Who are we? What are we? There was a period of time where every week we had to make a different decision. Multi-level student pressures also have kicked in. That is a webinar in and of itself, taking care of our students. It has led to increased workloads, additional challenges, and pressures to do more with less. We are still battling significant grief, loss of loved ones, trauma, and exhaustion. For those of us who have been assaulted, maybe in an accident or had a near-death experience, we experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. With this, it has exacerbated it for many, and for some of us, has created initial PTSD. There's been anxiety and uncertainty regarding our direction. This new normal that we still are not positive about has to coexist with the need to process the deaths and loss of significant milestones, graduations, weddings, funerals, births, vacations, even gathering with friends and families, going to a restaurant. All of this had to be curtailed. The losses and traumas that we experienced cannot be magically replaced. They will not magically disappear. Compassion fatigue for support of our academic and emotional needs of our students is another element that has kicked in. Again, because of the pressures to take care of us and to take care of them and our families and communities. The current stage of this change and challenge from COVID combined with world elements has created a trauma that I see as the perfect storm. So the Impact Employee Assistance Program, or EAP, for higher education in Ohio, I took a look at some of the statistics and I want to share some of that with you. Now, this is based on 24 institutions in Ohio comprised of 80,000 plus employee lives. We found that stress as a presenting issue, no surprise, was the highest in the past 5 years. Mental health and stress for higher education was the highest percentage of any of our client relationships, including healthcare. Children and dependent usage was the highest in 5 years, which means that it's affecting families. Budgeting was a top navigated topic on the EAP website, suggesting financial related stressors. Mental health related cases tripled in the fourth quarter from the first quarter of 2021, which we see as COVID fatigue and fits what we were talking about. Let's take a breath. So now we're talking about what we lived through and what we continue to deal with. It is overwhelming. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about how do we approach this and how do we navigate this? Recognize, reverse, resilience, the 3R approach. Recognize it. Watch for signs, the warning signs of burnout. If you don't know you have it, how are you going to deal with it? Because as you recall, in some of what we were talking about, you may be detached. You may not be aware of what's going on around you. The objective is to reverse it, to undo the damage it's created by managing the stress and seeking support. Some of it we can do on our own, and some of this with help. Resilience is the byproduct of taking care of our physical and emotional health. I'd like to share with you some strategies that are taken from a program that I developed years ago called Using Stress to Your Advantage. And I hope that some of this will be helpful in navigating through the difficulties of stress and addressing the burnout factors. To begin with, influences overall stress, IHO. I can manage it by myself, or I need help from others in order to accomplish that, or maybe it's O, it's just out of my control. So if we look at examples of that and have them somewhere, okay. Adjustment of my schedule, exercise, getting more sleep, balancing my diet. These are things I can manage on my own. Help from others, delegate more, get counseling support. Out of my control, it's raining. But even there, I can get an umbrella. See if I can navigate my slides. The stress occurs when we believe we have no control over what happens. We see few or no options. The source of stress is ambiguous. The stress is prolonged over a period of time, and several sources of stress can exist simultaneously. And if we plan for and manage it inappropriately, it can all lead to this condition called burnout. Now, stress gets a bad rap. In fact, stress can be very positive and be very good. Burnout is the culprit. So, other influences of stress. Feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Which do you think comes first? Let's take a look. Stimulation, perception, a thought, a feeling, a behavior. Stimulation, something happens. Perception, we become aware of it. 5 senses, we hear it, see it, taste it, smell it, touch it. That in turn generates a thought, which motivates a feeling, which creates a behavior. You're on a 737, you're sitting back there, perhaps with your mask, thinking about a beverage, not drinking it because you're wearing a mask. And as you do, a flight attendant races back to the plane where you're sitting, picks up the receiver and says, and then proceeds to race to the front of the plane. Your thought, we're going down. You're feeling panic. You're terrified. Your behavior, you start to ruminate. You awfulize. You think of worst case scenarios. You try to navigate yourself to find out what's happening. Well, what really happened? The stimulation was the flight attendant picked up the phone because it was ringing. They answered saying, oh my God, it's happening now, I can't believe it, and raced to the front of the plane. Their thought was, how can my sister get divorced today before we discussed it? Their feeling is frustration, anger. The behavior is race up front to tell my colleague and discuss it with them out of earshot of the rest of the passengers. Perception. Are our thoughts always accurate? Were they emotionally or rationally defined? Stress continuum. So when we look at stress, again, being a positive leading to a negative, it's not all negative. Stress on the left-hand side of the stress continuum creates a positive reaction. If you weren't under stress, you wouldn't perform, you wouldn't get up in the morning, you wouldn't do things. Eustress is a condition of elevated energy. It creates an opportunity for positive movement, maybe a new job, maybe you're performing on stage, something that elevates and gets your endorphins racing. It's a positive thing. If you'll notice on the left-hand side of the continuum, stress is able to lead to positive, rational problem solving. We can think things through. We can come up with good decisions. As soon as we kick over to the right-hand side of the continuum, now we're in distress. Distress leads to emotional reactivity. And over time, as we indicated before, severe stress for a prolonged period of time, particularly if it's ambiguous, COVID, can create an opportunistic situation for burnout. So the objective here is to know when you're crossing that line. How do we know? What are some of our symptoms that told us that we just went from eustress to distress? Maybe it's frustration or fear because we don't feel we're in control. Maybe we feel overwhelmed because we fail to set limits. Maybe we're angry and we are overreacting. Plan of action. So how do we use what we're talking about here? IHO, can I handle it? Do I need help? Is it out of my control? Also, on the stress continuum, did I cross that line? And if so, how do I know it? And what do I do about it? So I created 3 steps: awareness, options, equaling balance. Funny thing is, I came in later years to see that that's reflected in the 3 R's as well. Recognize is equal to awareness, reverse is equal to options, and if we can create balance, then we can become resilient. So, step 1, as soon as you realize any of the symptoms that you can write in your box, symptoms of stress that tell you you've crossed the line, because you're not going to know it on the basis of every day. You need something that brings it to your attention. As soon as it comes to your awareness, stop. The problem is we often just continue, and what are we doing? We're building it. The pressure is increased, and the more pressure, the more it's increased, and the more we combine it with other stressors, the less likely it is we will recognize it distinctly or even deal with it. It just adds to our trip en route to burnout, or at the very least, distress. So stop when you know you're crossing that line and recognize it. Step 1, know it's happening. Maybe take a rubber band, snap it lightly on your wrist to remind you. It will take you away from the immediate thought. Once you stopped that and recycled your rational thinking, we move to options. Select your best immediate available options. I'm going to repeat that. Best immediate available option. This doesn't have to be perfection. What this needs to be is something that interferes with the continuation of the stress and pressure. We are going to reverse the process. In turn, then, once that's accomplished and we're back in that rational thinking, then we can fine-tune and adapt over time. Resilience. So let's look at an example. Perception. Your child is misbehaving. I've raised 4 sons. I have 4 grown sons and I have grandchildren. I can tell you, I've witnessed this before. Your thought, why can't they just listen to me? Your feeling, frustration, anger, your behavior, you yell and say things reactively. Why? Because you're in distress now. You've crossed the line. It's emotional reactivity. Let's review our steps. Step 1, awareness. I know because of the anger and frustration. I've crossed the line. What do I need to do? Stop. Select the best available option, which is step number 2. Breathe. Take a step back. Speak at an even tone. Why don't we just set some limits? Maybe a timeout for the child. Let them decompress. Instead of yelling at them, agitating them, and increasing what behavior you don't want them to exhibit that you're showing them, let's rethink this. But we can only do this if we stop and look at our best option rationally. In turn, once we're in a better frame of mind, balance. Create a plan for setting boundaries and even communication. Some other ideas. Relaxation training. How do we balance our brake and gas pedal? I always suggest for patients and just in general for friends, and I do it myself, relaxation. But there's also yoga, there's meditation, massage therapy. All of these options, all of these resources are available and need to be used on a regular basis. If you go to the gym and work out, your muscles become solid. But when you stop going, flab begins to form. So this is not a point in time, this is a lifestyle decision. When you are able to support your autonomic nervous system, not your central nervous system that mediates things that you're aware of, but things like digestion, breathing, things that regulate and create a stress reaction. Physiologically, when you can stabilize that, you can become more effective when you go through the patterns of addressing, managing, and pivoting to deal with stress and pressure. The goal of relaxation exercises, yoga, meditation, massage therapy. You want to raise serotonin, dopamine, and your endorphin levels. That leads to the relaxation response. The goal is to lower elevated cortisol levels, which typically leads to distress and dysfunction. Some other ideas. Stress log. I don't know if you thought about it, but by keeping a stress log, it will give you a sense of where your stressors are and will help you to effectively plan to manage them. So what I suggest you do, just a simple piece of paper, write down the date, the time, the event, who you were with, your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and maybe rate it 1 to 5 in terms of how stressful it was. After a couple of weeks, go back and look for those patterns, look for those themes, and try to consolidate that into a plan of action. Where do I need to put my energy? What typically gets me charged in a negative direction? Suggestion. If you're making an entry in your stress log while you're talking to somebody who's stressing you out, not a good idea when they ask, what are you doing? And you tell them. Be discreet. Do this on your own outside of those people that are your stressors. Commitment. If you always do what you've always done, you will continue to achieve the same result. In order to improve, we can best benefit from a plan of action that we are dedicated to follow. So take what you can from what we're talking about, both the symptoms to be aware of and some of the ways to navigate through them. If you think about it, what we're suggesting is consistent with a step-by-step approach. If you see ice on a windshield and you start hacking away at it, you can break your windshield, injure your hand, but you're not going to get rid of the ice. If you start to remove little pieces and then bigger pieces come away until it all is resolved and you can see through the window, chip away at it. I love imagery, and maybe that will be helpful. Additional steps for coping with burnout. Get regular checkups, well care, eat a healthy diet, low sugar, refined carbs, no or less coffee. Coffee is one I still have to work on. Get enough sleep. Ask for help. Talk to your colleagues, your supervisors. Catharsis is good. Sometimes just talking it out. If you implode it, that's like a subdural hematoma. It's dangerous. If you have a bump, you're letting it out. Sometimes emotional vomiting is good. Let it out. Seek emotional support when necessary from those family, friends, a therapist perhaps, or your employee assistance program. Reframe your philosophy about work if it's counterproductive currently. Take appropriate time off as available. Take breaks throughout your workday as possible. And this is so important, nurture your personal relationships outside of work. Do not become so focused that you become one-dimensional. Start your day out with a relaxing ritual. Remember, it dictates how you're going to feel the rest of the day. As we've been saying throughout, adapt healthy eating, exercise, and sleep habits. Set boundaries that are appropriate. Take a break from technology. Excuse me. I have to take a break. Take a break from technology because it can be overwhelming. Nourish your creative side, even if you're analytical, and especially if you're analytical. Engage in that self-care that we've been talking about. Stay in the present and be mindful. People who live in the past and are always thinking about the future don't get to enjoy the present. I've always been fascinated when you're on vacation and you're at a beautiful location and there's somebody taking selfies, taking pictures of everything. They're not looking around. They're not in the moment. They're not in the present state of where you are. They're not taking it in. And the funny thing is, they're probably, after they post them, never even look at those pictures again. They missed out. Be in the present and be mindful of that. and is offered today, appropriately manage your stress. Use those relaxation, meditation, and yoga techniques that I talked about. A set of exercises from this program will be provided for you. It has a set of instructions, my verbal instructions for each exercise, and then my colleague, Dr. Robert Kaplan, will go through each set of exercises. It starts off with progressive muscle relaxations. It gets into breathing exercises and meditation, as well as visual imagery. It's sequential and designed to be a benefit, particularly in reducing stress and elevating that biochemical reaction that we talked about. Mental health resources. Your employee assistance program is confidential. It's 24/7, 365. Make sure you take advantage of what your institution is providing by way of their employee assistance program. It's immediate. You make a call and you have access to a counselor to talk about, work through, come up with a plan in the moment in support of you, your family, your colleagues, your community, even your pets. This is designed for you to get that confidential help. And you have access to them for counseling sessions, virtual and in-person, life coaching, financial wellness, and a wide range of work-life referrals and resources to help you improve your well-being, make life easier, and cope more effectively with stress and pressure. Well, at this point, I am going to turn it over to Jessica so that we can come up with some questions that you have and see if I can provide some answers.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gecht, for that very informative presentation. We do have at least a question that's already been posted. I just want to say that while you were talking, I've already started my stress log here in the background. So, and then I've already taken note of a lot of the strategies and resources that you mentioned, certainly the 3 R's, recognize and reverse and resilience, IHO and AOB. Again, really great informative information that you mentioned here for our stakeholders who are participating. And so I just want to mention to you all, please feel free to utilize the Q&A and or chat function for your questions that you have for Dr. Gecht today. We are so very fortunate to have him here with the Ohio Program for Campus Safety and Mental Health, presenting on COVID burnout in the era of COVID. And so there is a question that I see here already posted. And this question states, or is inquiring whether or not there's any advice or suggestions on how staff members can advocate for greater systemic changes in the workplace to improve employee wellness. So Dr. Gecht, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll offer some personal experience. I mentioned that I served as CEO for 39 years. I indicated to my staff what I needed was, if you're going to come in with a comment about something that is negative or problematic, come in with a potential solution as well. I think that, again, looking at that stress continuum, if it's just an emotional reactivity, stating that I'm upset with something, I dislike it, I think it's unfair, while that's valid, I'm sure, it also does not support the idea of rational problem solving. So I think that if you come armed with reasonable, fair solutions and an understanding that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, what steps can we take? Again, breaking that ice on the windshield piece by piece. Let's look at bite-sized pieces that are reasonable. So let's come in with a higher probability of success. And I think that with that frame of mind, that frame of reference, and coming in as a colleague who wants to support positive change and sees a way to do that, is a more effective way than saying, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, and I don't like the way it is. I think you'll get a lot more traction and a lot more mileage. That always worked for me.
Excellent, wonderful, wonderful. The next question, and of course, Abby did share the resource that you talked about or regarding exercises. And maybe you can expand a little bit more about that particular exercise, because the question is whether or not these particular exercises can be done during work hours.
Okay, also, really good question. I would suggest that it's done in private and it's done in a comfortable place where you can truly relax. Because it starts off by asking you to close your eyes, please do not do it when you're driving, walking, or surfing, or whatever you might be doing. You want to make sure that you do it in a place where you can feel uninhibited and completely free, because that's what we're talking about, letting go. We're talking about being able to take yourself out of your environment and put yourself in this safe place where you can be without worrying. So do not cross your arms or legs. And this will be in the instructions. Make sure that it's not too hot, not too cold. There's no cooking odors or anything else that will arouse your senses, because you want to get truly into the exercise. So progressive muscle relaxation will start from head to toe in tensing and relaxing. So sympathetic, parasympathetic response cycle of the autonomic nervous system, your gas and your brake. Because the objective is in real time, when you're using rational thinking and problem solving, you will be stronger physiologically if you practice these skills. Also breathing. I mentioned, for example, a child is overreacting or maybe having a tough time listening. A parent who is stressed out already and so much going on, particularly during COVID, work pressures, everything else, you lose it. You are raising the level of agitation for yourself and them. If you can learn how to push that button to bring it down a notch and maybe another notch, and to do it systemically, physiologically, and through cognitive change. When we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, what we're talking about is changing your self-talk to accommodate healthier behaviors through your thinking and feeling to get you to be able to stabilize. The relaxation exercise is for you. I would suggest, as the instructions indicate, do each of the 3 exercises for 2 weeks at a time. First one, second one, third one. Do it, if you can do it 3 days, 5 days a week, once a day, just do 1 exercise at a time. It's about 15 minutes. Find a time. I wouldn't necessarily do it at work, because then you got to come out of it and get back into a work mode. Do it at a time where it's for you, where you can decompress, where you can elevate the experience and opportunity. You want to be mindful of, you deserve it. This is your reward. This is the dessert after eating your vegetables. Although I like the vegetables too.
Well, that's some excellent advice, and certainly the good things to keep in mind and while not driving. There's a comment, this is from Madonna Gecht, that she's glad you mentioned withdrawal from doing normal day-to-day activities, and that it's certainly speaking to a different perspective than thinking that, you know, one would be lazy. So that's certainly appreciative on her end. There's another question, and this is kind of switching gears a little bit. and more so speaking to students. And this question is, how do we help college students that we serve to get themselves out of isolation? And certainly we know that, even though this question is relegated to students, that it also could speak to faculty and staff as well, as we all have been isolated for a certain period during COVID, and as we continue in this ongoing pandemic.
Yeah, and these are all great questions. If you're a student and you're listening to this, or you're on faculty or staff, and you are there to support your students, this pertains to you. We have gone through a major stressor. We have been slam dunked into the ground. This has taken us all out of our comfort zone. These are uncharted territories that we have lived in for 2 years. The thing about a stressor is, during the time of stress, we are mounting our energies to cope with it, to deal with it, to survive. After the stressor is when we might get even more stress reaction. We might feel even more isolation. It's kind of, oh my God, did I just go through that? Wow, what could have happened to me? How am I going to adjust? How am I going to realign myself with this new normal? I don't even know what this new normal is. It changes every day. Is there another variant? Should I be going out? Should I wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? Just a level of pressure. So the suggestion is back to, what would be a step that you're comfortable with, which is a baby step? It might mean, for example, going outside and taking a walk. It might be going to one of the beautiful parks if you're in Ohio or throughout the state of Ohio, and certainly I'm sure in other states that might be participating today. We have some beautiful parks. Go out. We're getting towards warmer weather, particularly, that makes it even more conducive. Make a phone call to somebody you haven't called in a while. Start to reframe normal. Start to feel normal again. And you start with self-talk. Don't pressure yourself to go too fast, and we're all different. So what might be okay for Bill might not be okay for John, may not be okay for Mary, may not be okay for Susie. We all have a different need and a different way to get there. So take a step back, take inventory, make a list of what your goals and objectives are and the steps that you're going to take. And if you feel restricted, if you feel burnt out, if you feel like you're one of those folks who just doesn't have the energy, it's all mind dulling, can't get into it, then find a resource on campus. There are resources to support student assistance. The campus has a ton of supports. And certainly the EAP and other programs that the university supports and encourages. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. If you can do it, I. If you can't do it, you need help, H. It almost definitely is not O. Because as I offered with the umbrella, even if it's raining on you and you can't go out, look for an umbrella. Look for a step, something in the right direction. And that is what you need to do. Reach out. Do not sit back and accept this. Fight it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And here's another question with the concern of burdening others. It states, I'm a staff psychologist in the University Counseling Center, and I expect that we have a lot of folks representing counseling centers today. And I hear from the students that I work with a lot that they don't use their social supports because of the fear or because they are afraid of burdening others. What are some ways to challenge these unhelpful beliefs in a caring and compassionate way?
Yeah, I'm going to shock everybody with this, but the world is round. It's not flat. We once thought it was. You've got to expand your willingness to take a little risk here. And the funny thing is, just like the world is round, you'll keep on going around in a circle. You're not going to fall off the end. If you take calculated steps, counseling center staff are always, student support services, student affairs are always focused on just that. The first word in that is student. And they care, and they're there for you. If you're a student, take advantage of it. It is not the risk you think it is. And it is not a sign of weakness. During my lifetime, I've watched the continuum of, we don't talk about mental health, we don't talk about feelings, we don't deal with those things. Then suddenly the emergence of, well, maybe it's okay. Now, I think we have enlightened ourselves to recognize that emotional health is no different than if you broke your leg, you do something about it. And I think the level of understanding and acceptance, some of our athletes, Olympic athletes, Kevin Love on the Cavs, have come out and said, okay, I need help and I'm getting it. And it's making me better and I'm able to function now. I think that more than anything, you need to look at the possibilities and not the fears, because the fears are exaggerated. Those are on the irrational, emotional side of the stress continuum. Flip yourself over to the rational problem solving, and you'll see it makes sense. There are a ton of people on our campuses that are there to help you. Take advantage of it. I can't say it enough.
And indeed, I think that's helpful for, if we have any students who are participating, and certainly for, again, individuals who represent our campus counseling centers today. I want to switch gears for just 1 second with a question. And I know you had presented some data toward the beginning regarding an increase, and again, to no one's surprise, regarding the increase in level of mental health and anxiety and depression. The question is certainly regarding the demographics and whether or not the data that you shared, if that showed particularly whether or not it was any specific demographic that showed that increase, such as women or any particular minority group that had, particularly showed that increase. I don't know if you could speak to that or not.
Yeah, I'd have to take a deeper dive into that in order to be able to provide that. But certainly, we can do that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because there was a recent article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, which spoke to the fact that certainly a lot of female individuals in higher education had, certainly shared about the impact of them being burnt out at a higher level as compared to male staff members. And so I was just kind of curious if any of your data had showed that same information.
Traditionally, we have found more utilization from women than men. Females tend to take better care of their health in general, although that slope is changing somewhat. And I think males are starting to address it more reasonably, but females have traditionally been better advocates of mental and physical health.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you again for sharing that information. There are a few more questions remaining, and I'm looking at our time, and I just want to again, thank you, Dr. Gecht, for this very informative presentation, certainly a very timely presentation for our campus stakeholders today. There's questions regarding how to get on the listserv. Abby will go ahead and share not only how you can obtain CEUs, CMEs, if that's something that you're interested in obtaining. The activity code, one last time, is 84 TIES. That's 84 TIES if you are interested in obtaining credits for participating today. Also, if you are interested in learning about any of our future webinars and any of our future events and chats, please feel free to email us. There's an email address that Abby is posting right now into the Q&A, or excuse me, actually the chat function. We will certainly be glad to add you to our email listserv. You can also follow us on any of our social media sites. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I believe all of them at this point in time. So please feel free to follow us. There's information on there. And then there was also a question regarding a copy of the slides. And so yes, this information as well as the exercise will be disseminated to our listserv and uploaded onto our webpage. So there will be actually an opportunity for you to get that information. Also, if you're concerned whether or not your particular credential, whether or not you are available to receive credits, so that is available for counselors, social workers here within the state of Ohio. Feel free to also send an email to that email address, and we can answer any questions that you have regarding that today. And so again, thank you again, Dr. Gecht, for that very enlightening presentation. And I'm certainly our stakeholders here in the state of Ohio and beyond can thank you for that presentation.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me today.
Absolutely. Take care, and take care, everyone. We hope to see you next month as we discuss 988 here in the state of Ohio.